Adventures in Gaming.
With Big Man Anthony.
And Little Man George.
So do you have do you remember the names of the magazines before?
Yeah, I do. I mean, when's the last time you bought a video game magazine?
I can't even remember, honestly.
Yeah, me
I know you
either.
bought some recently. I know you did. You told me that there was a one that came out and you recently purchased.
There's
That was
some, well, there's some
like
European magazines that still come out and they sell them in Barnes and Noble. But so when we were growing up and we didn't have the internet and we didn't
yeah.
have YouTube or social media, we got our video game news from video game magazines.
Uh-huh.
And basically, we had to wait, a month between issues to learn what was going on. And like I said, there was a time where I think I looked forward to video game magazines almost as much as I looked forward to a new video game because I
Yeah.
couldn't wait to see what was in the next issue. And one of my favorite
Kind of like a
magazines.
direct today. Kind of similar to
Yeah,
when we wait for direct.
yeah, exactly. And a lot of it though was, there were like rumors, there were things like that. I think EGM was one of the best magazines. I remember, you know, uh, buying it every month, collecting them, not throwing them out, reading them, from front to back every month. And there was Game Fan, and I think we were both huge Game Fan magazine fans. I think we were both really into Game Fan magazine because Game Fan covered arcades, they covered Japan, right? They always had like, and I think they always had like a jump start on the news for some reason. I think they took some chances. Do you remember like they would have like news before anybody?
They kind of did. They kind of did. It's almost like they were like in touch with the. I would guess the developers at
Mm-hmm.
that point. They were like in touch with the developers. They also had insights inside like maybe people that they knew from the companies like Sega and Nintendo and stuff like that. Inside people.
It was
So
almost like they were a little bit tabloidish.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but they
For like a
always,
video game, yeah,
yeah, for video games, and they always had just stuff that nobody else had. I'm
yeah,
assuming most of it was reliable. It's hard to tell now. I'd
yeah,
have to go back and see. I still have some of them. I still have some magazines. I don't have too many.
yeah.
I have a stack in my closet. I'd have to, you know, get through a bunch of stuff just to get to them. But I think Game Fan and EGM were my favorites. And then I had a subscription to Nintendo Power. And I had Nintendo Power
Nintendo
magazine.
magazines, I remember.
Yeah. I
So
had it
yeah,
from the first issue. From the very
yeah.
first issue, I had Nintendo Power because before Nintendo Power, which was an official Nintendo magazine,
Magazine, yeah,
so it was not going to have any rumors, it wasn't going to have any bad information, it wasn't going to have information about anything but Nintendo.
yeah.
But there was a newsletter that existed before Nintendo Power. So I had like basically some sort of a subscription to a newsletter. And at some point, the newsletter became Nintendo Power Magazine. So I never missed an issue, ever. I don't have them all, but at one point I had every issue of Nintendo Power. I used to buy them at Barnes and Noble. I used to buy them at some magazine stores. And those were exciting because that was really the first place you would get official Nintendo information. So I remember when, for example, Nintendo Power Magazine unveiled the Nintendo 64, which, by the way, used to be called the Ultra 64. And you still call it Ultra 64.
Yeah.
And I think when you play the Killer Instinct arcade game, you actually get the Ultra 64 logo at the beginning, which is really
Yeah.
cool because it was supposed to be called Ultra 64. But anyway, what are your memories of Game Fan, EGM, Next Generation magazine, which seemed to be more for the hardcore gamer, or the gamer that was more into specs and hardware information, almost like a digital foundry kind of perspective, but in a magazine. But like I was saying, to us
Yeah.
back then, that was where we got the news because video game
Yeah.
news was hard to find.
EGM was one of my favorite. It,
Hmm.
it, it really was. I don't know. It just had a nice way of packing everything
Hmm.
all together, and it was probably, I think it was probably the most popular one, I think, at
I
the
think
time.
so. Yeah.
But there was also like what was that super glossy one that I loved?
Game
Like,
Fan.
oh yeah, I don't know why, but people don't understand. It's like you don't even see them these days because it was it was almost like a picture kind of quality, and it made the games look actually better
Mhm.
than they were. Like, so we were overhyping the games kind of when we looked at them, because when they were, and also they kind of blurred out a little of the pixels. So in a way, they kind of did look a little better on the magazine than they did. But sometimes, I mean, when you look at an image that's this size, it's not going to compare to, like, the size of your TV. So definitely it did look like a higher resolution than it would when you got it. So sometimes we would overhype ourselves. I remember about that. And also it was also lead us to, like, in those in between magazines, we'd try them all because there was so much time between one EGM and the next EGM, that we would be like, oh, wait, let's pick up this one, let's see what this one's at. And we would always love when they put that detail into the photos of the games. I mean, that was important. I remember that EGM. Oh, what magazine was it that kind of like the text part wasn't that great, but when it was the pictures, they kind of did like a little bit of like a glossy finish on that.
I
It
think
was like
that's
a
Game
mix.
Fan. I think it's Game Fan.
Was that Game Fan? No, I remember Game Fan being the whole thing, and it was that big magazine. It was so much bigger than the other
You
ones.
might be thinking about Next Generation magazine.
Oh, that's it. Next Generation.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That was a little
Next-
bigger.
The Game Fan had, like, on the pictures, it had the nice glossy finish, but on the text it was just normal. And then Next Generation was a bigger magazine.
It was.
Full gloss. The whole, like, I think it was a little bit more expensive, but it was
Probably
and
was.
It was thinner too, so we were getting mad about that because it was like a thin edition, but yet it was worth it. It was definitely worth it at
It
the
was
time.
worth it, and it was exciting waiting for a new issue of a magazine every month. And something that really, I mean, I think it kind of exists, but in like, a crowdfunding sort of way. Back then, there used to be fanzines, which I don't think I've ever owned one. I used to hear about them, and those were basically fan-created magazines, because magazines were really all we had.
You would see them in, like, odd places, like let's say Chinatown, or like little, like, weird place like the city. You would find things like that. And I remember seeing them being kind of into, like, oh, I've never seen this one.
Yeah.
But I don't remember if I actually bought any of them. I might have.
I don't think I've ever owned one.
I just don't remember too well about that.
And I kind of thought about making one. I think one time we were like cutting pictures out of magazines to make our own
Yeah.
fanzine just to see what it
Yeah.
would look like. And I ruined those issues. I shouldn't have done that because I'm kind of a collector. But and also there was Game
Do you
Pro.
have any?
I have,
Do you
yeah.
currently have?
I'd have to get them out. Yeah.
But what like what
Oh,
what do
I,
you have? Like,
I have some Nintendo Power, some Game Fan, and some EGM.
that's
Maybe
that's,
one or two Next Generations also. Maybe.
yeah, that's crazy.
Not a lot. Not what I used to have, obviously, but like a few,
Yeah. I saved them for a long time, and then I think I put them into which is why I hate storage, because things get moldy and they just don't,
Yeah, they don't hold
just
up.
don't. Yeah, they don't hold up. So, like, if you don't have them, like, in your room or somewhere where it's like, they just go bad. And you
My
also have to, like,
cats
cut
ended up scratching mine. So
some of
yeah, that's why I had a bookshelf and I had them stacked up on the bookshelf outside my bedroom, and the cats used to scratch them, and the
Yeah, of course,
spines,
perfect. Yeah.
all the spines were torn up at one point.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
I
so
have something like that with scratched up.
yeah, they weren't in good condition. Even some of the ones I kept, I think, are still scratched. Some of the old ones. But then there was like Game Pro magazine, which, nothing against Game Pro, is my least favorite of all the magazines. They were
Yeah.
just very generic. They never seemed to break any news. We were more into news and rumors, speculation. But I remember here's a memory I'll always have. The very first pictures ever of Nintendo 64 footage were in Game Fan magazine. And I'll never forget, because how much, I think we were both waiting for Nintendo 64 to come
Yeah.
out. It was delayed. We used to call Nintendo
Yeah.
asking them what was going on, as if we were important
Well,
people.
that was what a point I was gonna make before you said that. That here's the thing. So we would buy all the editions of different magazines, EGM, the Nintendo Power, trying to stay up to date because there was no like real way of getting the information.
Mhm.
But at the same time, we make those phone calls to the companies and to the developers.
Mhm.
So we were constant. We were almost like reporters, constantly trying
We
to
were.
figure out what was going on. Yeah.
We were reporters, but just for fun because
Yeah, for us.
we didn't
Yeah,
have
which
an
is-
outlet.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would get our information basically from magazines and then call, game companies and ask them what was going on. We even had a very famous phone call where we got Nintendo and Sega on the phone at the same time. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
And we were
yeah,
silent. We
yeah.
let them talk to each other.
yeah, yeah.
And they
yeah,
figured it out. They're like, "Oh, somebody, used a party line to call us." And
yeah.
they were like very friendly. Remember, they were like, "So, how's
Yeah,
everything?"
they kind of talked to each other.
talked to
were
each
friendly
other.
To each other. Yeah, it was actually pretty good.
It was a good phone call.
pretty good. Yeah.
And so I remember because I was, a huge Nintendo fan, I still am, but I was
Yeah.
waiting for, Nintendo 64 to come out, and I was like, what are these games going to look like? Because I was picturing Donkey Kong Country style graphics, only better. That's what I was picturing
Okay.
Nintendo
Yeah, I mean, that's
64
what we
games.
thought. Honestly, that's what we thought 3D was going.
And I was
And
wrong.
and because we saw 3D already, because we had seen and it wasn't that great. We weren't
Right.
like big fans.
Because we saw
You know?
Virtua Fighter, we
Yeah.
saw Virtua Racing, we saw
Yeah.
Star Fox.
Yeah, and we were like, what? Well,
Polygons, very low polygon count games don't look great.
no,
They
not
just
at
don't.
all.
So the first time I saw Mario 64, Super Mario 64 in Game
Yeah.
Fan magazine, I was like, why does the game look like Star Fox? Why does Mario look like he's in Star Fox? Why is he made out of polygons? I pictured a 2D Super Mario game that looked better than Donkey Kong Country.
You know what I'm laughing at? I didn't even notice. I have this button backwards.
I'm leaving this in, by the way. You talking about your button.
Here we go. Look. I just didn't notice. I didn't even look at my footage, and then I had it backwards.
And that's one of my most memorable, video game magazine moments because it's the first time I saw what I was waiting so long to see. And I was disappointed. Now, don't get me wrong. You know this, that Super Mario 64 is still one of my favorite video games of all time. Once I played it, once I saw it in motion, the real game for the first time, I was very impressed. Once I played it, I knew, okay, I understand it now. I understand why they made this game out of polygons. I get where the future is headed. I was wrong. I thought it was going to be 3D rendered graphics like Donkey Kong Country. And it's still one of my favorite games of all time. But that's one of my, video game magazine memories. It
What
was
about
just...
Sega Visions? Did you ever buy those?
Which ones?
Sega Visions? It was a Sega magazine, yeah.
I think I had a few of them. Yeah, I think I had a few. I think as we were getting older, there were other magazines. There was like some European magazines like Edge, which was kind of like Next Generation.
Yeah, I remember Edge. Yeah. Edge was kind of cool too.
think it still
There wasn't
exists,
a
by
lot
the
of
way.
them. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of them, but we liked them. I
Yeah.
remember that. They
Yeah,
were also high quality. They were pretty good.
very high quality. Barnes and Noble, I think, was the
Yeah.
only store I ever saw them in. And
Edge was another one that was very kind of thin, compared to like EGMs and stuff like that. EGM, I think that's why they took so long because they collected a lot of content.
yeah, EGM was always overall probably the best magazine.
Overall, yeah.
But I remember being a kid and being so excited when that Nintendo Power magazine was in the mailbox. And it used to be 6 issues a year. When they went up to 12 issues a year,
Yeah.
I was like, this is great. I'm going to get one a month. They used to alternate between regular issues and strategy guides, and then they went to just 12 regular issues a year, and that was awesome. I even had the Nintendo Power pin,
Yeah.
and I think I still have it somewhere. I have to find it.
I think we used to go to the same place to pick them up at Cherry Valley.
Cherry Valley didn't. No, it was the store near Cherry Valley.
Yeah, that's what I meant. But
Yeah.
I just called it the Cherry Valley place. Yeah.
Yeah, they used to have all the magazines. Then we used to try to
Yeah.
find stores like that would have them before anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because sometimes they would be in the stores before you would, if you subscribed, you wouldn't get them in the mail right away. They would be in the
Yeah.
stores first. But then I think, I don't know, like as far as like your experience, but we probably both switched to websites. As far as like my personal preferences go, I'd rather magazines or YouTubers. Websites to me, weren't as fun.
They weren't. I mean, websites weren't really polished back then. That's
Hmm.
what it was, And even websites today, like, I mean, where do we go? We go to like YouTube.
I go to
We go,
YouTube. Yeah.
yeah, we'll maybe look at shorts on either Instagram
Yeah.
or
Social
stuff
media.
like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like, I mean, websites really weren't the place to go. I mean, websites sometimes were interesting. I mean, SNK had an interesting website though.
Mm.
They had a lot of things inside of it. I remember we used to go there and learn a lot of things from them. And they had a very nice, polished website because you could see how nice the details were of like of the pictures that they put up. So that was one of the good ones. And I felt like every other one was very clunky, very unpolished. But there's we forgot to talk about Game Informer. Remember Game Informer?
Game Informer is what, GameStop's magazine.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was a popular magazine.
It was a popular
I remember,
magazine.
yeah.
It wasn't one of my favorites though, to be honest.
I think it came with when you had a GameStop subscription.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have some of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me it wasn't like the early days of video game magazines. It came a little bit
No.
later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly right. You're right. And just like the did you know there was an official PlayStation magazine too?
Yeah.
And one called Xbox Nation. Did you ever buy one of those?
I don't think I
Or
ever
pick one
bought
of
one of
those up?
those. No.
I never did. I never did. I mean, at that point, I think we started looking more at websites
Hmm.
and stuff like that. Yeah, yeah. But
Do you know what I still have somewhere that
What?
you might remember and you might be jealous? That Neo Geo like folder with like
Oh,
information.
like it was yeah, it was like a yeah, it
It's not
was
a
like
magazine, but
it's like a catalog of
yeah.
all the new products. It was really cool. Yeah, yeah. I
I
mean,
don't even know
like
how I got that.
that was so cool. I remember you were like taunting it at me, like, and I was like, "Oh wow, that's so cool." I think you know how it happened is because we spoke to Chad, and I think he sent you that. I
Oh,
remember.
probably. Maybe I asked him for it.
I think that's how it happened. I remember trying to call him because I wanted mine, and I'm like, "Wait a minute, like you sent him one. You're like, how come I didn't get mine?"
Yeah, I
Or
think
what
it had
about
like stickers and a pin. It came with like cool
no,
stuff.
it came pretty loaded. Neo Geo was always nice. Like SNK always gave nice. What do you call that? Like
High
little-
quality, everything.
Yeah, little perks that it would give you. Even like the games would come in with like little stickers and stuff. Like you would always like paste them on something.
Yeah, it's fun.
Official games. Yeah, it's good stuff because I mean that's what we liked. Like let's be honest, you liked and collectors. Ask any collector, and what they want is or even the collections today. When you buy a game, you want a nice box. You want it to be colorful. You want it to come inside, and you want the cartridge to be something like with good like some graphics or something nice on it. You want the catalog of the game to be included and to be like of high quality too, with some pictures and everything inside. So it was nice that they did all those little details. So I do give them a lot of props for that. And I think Nintendo did a little bit of that themselves too, I remember. So that is one of the cool things about those systems.
Yeah, once in a while, Nintendo used to send out VHS tapes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They sent out a few. I remember the Donkey Kong Country like preview VHS tape. That was really cool. And when
That
I
is
think
cool,
back,
yeah.
I was always a fan of magazines, and I don't want to get into everything because it's a video game channel. But I used to buy a lot of magazines. I used to buy like Rolling Stone and Spin, and
Yeah.
like the men's magazines like Maxim and Stuff
Yeah.
and FHM. So I was always into
Were you ever
magazines.
part of that club, magazine club? Like you know, remember
No, I know what you
there's a
mean.
certain amount of magazines and they
I
come
never
in the
did that.
mail. Like
No,
that's so popular. I think I did it for that Men's Health magazine.
because I never really was like a subscriber to a lot of magazines. I used to buy them in the stores.
Yeah.
And I never like Nintendo Power was, I think, the only magazine I used to get in the mail. But no, I just loved magazines. Like I was a big
Yeah.
fan of magazines, and I loved video games. So obviously, I loved video game magazines. But then, I mean, so sometimes I try to remember exactly how. I mean, at some point we all became fans of YouTube. It's not like I found something incredible on my own, but like YouTubers, and
Yeah.
especially like video game YouTubers. For me,
Yeah.
I think it was around 2014.
Who's your first? Do you remember? Was your first like?
So, okay, I have some memories of when the original Switch was coming out, and they were having those preview events, which, by the
Okay.
way, somebody got an invitation to the Nintendo Switch 2
Yeah. Yeah.
experience. I don't want to say who.
Last time and this time, so that is so
Not
unfair.
last time. No, last time I was able to get into the Super Mario Run event
Oh, that's it.
with
That's it.
Shigeru Miyamoto. He was there.
Yeah. Oh
And
wow.
there was only one of those, by the way. There was
Wow.
just one. It was at the Apple Store in Soho, and
Okay.
somehow I did the email, the RSVP, and I got like a confirmation. But I said this can't be real, and I was a little bit late because I worked that night.
Yeah.
I was at work and I had to get over there really fast, and I was a little bit late, so I'm all the way in the back of the room. So I'm as far away from the stage as possible.
Yeah.
But all the Apple devices had Mario Run on them, so you could play it. You could play it on iPads and iPhones. And I kind of missed that whole part because I got there late. And then I got there just in time for the Shigeru Miyamoto interview, which was
Yeah.
really cool because, I mean, he's obviously, one
Yeah.
of the greatest of all time. And I was
Yeah.
actually,
That is.
yeah.
Did you take any pictures or anything while you were there?
Yes, I have a bunch of pictures actually.
Oh wow.
And I'm actually in the group photo that they took,
Oh wow.
but I'm all the way in the back. I'm like, I
I
think
mean,
that's my head.
yeah. Yeah.
There weren't that many people though, because it was an Apple store. It wasn't like
Yeah.
gigantic. I don't know if I had to guess, maybe 100 people. I don't know. It's hard. I'd have to count the group photo. And Kit and Krista were there because they
Yeah.
worked for Nintendo at the time, and I recognized them. So that was 2016, actually. So yeah, so when I was looking up stuff for like the original Switch, believe it or not, I discovered iJustine because even though she's not like a video game content creator, she was
Uh,
covering
yeah.
the Switch launch.
Well, that's what's interesting between me and you. While you were watching video game dedicated channels, I started getting a little into tech myself,
Mhm.
and so then I started looking at the video game reviews and everything on video games through the tech
Mhm.
people like Justine
Mhm.
and like CNET and other people like and so at the time it was kind of interesting because we were looking at the same content but through different
For
type of
different reasons.
yeah, yeah, different
um,
creators and different yeah.
I also discovered Game Explain. That was one of my first with the original crew that kind of, they kind of went their separate ways. I mean, they left Game Explain. They do their own thing now at Good Vibes Gaming. So it was iJustine, who really isn't just a video game content
Yeah.
creator, and she's one of the best out there. Game
Yeah.
Explain. And then it's funny because I'm a fan of RGT85.
Yeah.
Shout out to RGT85. Maybe he'll see this one day. But I discovered him on a different YouTube channel. I
Yeah.
discovered him on a podcast. It was a guy named Jay, and
Yeah.
I think the podcast was called Hey Jay,
Yeah.
and RGT was it was crass versus class. So
Okay.
Jay was the classy guy, and RGT was the crass guy,
Yeah.
and that's where I discovered him. And then once I realized he had his own channel, I started watching his channel, and I think from that point on, I probably discovered Spawn Wave, and I don't even know after that. It might have been Switch Force, and I still watch IGN podcasts. I still think they do a good job on their podcasts. I'm a big fan of Per Schneider on IGN. I'm a fan of Brian Altano. I think they do good podcasts on
Yeah.
IGN. And I mean, there's so many that I watch. Those weren't like,
Now
but
there's a
those
lot
were,
of newcomers. Like there's a lot of
that's what I
newcomers.
mean. Those are the originals, though.
Yeah.
Those are
Yeah.
the the original YouTube channels that I watched. But what about you as far as gaming YouTube channel? When did you start watching like
You RGT was through you,
yeah,
right?
yeah, I think I
And
probably
then
sent you
and
some of
then
your videos.
what's that guy's name? The Spirit Sprite guys. It's just because I was a Neo
Oh,
fan.
Scarlet Sprites.
Scarlet Sprites, yeah. Just because I was a big Neo fan, I found him, and he has a lot of good content. He has a lot of good stuff. Also, I love watching those reports of what's that guy that does that long. The guy
Not
with the glass. The,
Spawn Wave?
no, the one with the glass. I like Spawnwave. Spawnwave. I think I also got through you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but the other guy who does the big store, like he does stories, doesn't really do.
Oh, Scott the Woz.
Scott the Waz.
He's
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
I mean, he's amazing.
I mean, the way he just
Amazing.
the detail is just magical. Like if you haven't watched him, definitely watch him. Yeah.
And it's funny because he has two channels. He has
Yeah.
Scott's Stash and Scott the
Yeah.
Woz. And Scott the Woz is more of like a produced type of video.
Yeah.
And Scott's Stash is more of a like off the cuff, just him talking about stuff without the big production. And I like both channels because he keeps
Yeah.
them different. You know what I mean? There's a
Yeah.
difference
Yeah.
between
Yeah.
both
Yeah.
channels,
Yeah.
and they're really
Well, that's
good.
kind of the point. And I think, well, I mean, not getting off the topic, but I don't think people like know that like the way magazines and these articles and the YouTube, we would just like deep dive, like we would be like on top, like we would read the magazines one after one, and we would look at the pictures, and we would be the guys that were like Digital Foundry.
Mhm.
We would sit there and analyze. We would grab two magazines, right?
Mhm.
And we would analyze the pixels between. Oh, look, this is Street Fighter on Nintendo. This is Street Fighter on Sega, and we'd be like, we put them together, and we're like, okay, look, what changes? Look, this guy doesn't have a hat on this. Like, on
Oh
this
yeah, yeah.
and we found that every pixel fascinating in video games. We would nitpick, we would see what was better, we would go into like checking out the sound. I would buy the Sega version, you probably buy the Nintendo version, because that's how we were. And then we'd like compare them. I'd bring my equipment over and we'd compare them, and it was just fun. We would always agree, like this one has better sound, this one has better graphics, this one has a better fluidity, like it plays better.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, we could have totally made a channel back then, but it wasn't
Yeah.
a thing back then.
No.
Although we did start a little radio station that
We
that
started
were-
a radio station at John's house in his attic with a bunch of Radio Shack equipment
yeah,
and
Yeah.
like copper wire and
It's just
microphones.
yeah,
And we were it wasn't a video game radio show.
yeah, yeah.
Like we were
It was
Howard
just
Stern
music,
fans,
yeah.
and we were trying to do almost like not even like a Howard kind of show, but we were just like playing music off of tapes and talking and messing around. We had people on the phone we were talking to.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. I mean, it was a lot of fun.
And we had people on on the air, so it was fun. It was interesting. I mean, and we kind of did something similar when we did our phone calls. I mean, we're technically talking with engineers of the systems. We were talking with like, game creators, and we would pick their brains down to like every little like detail.
Like I said in our first show, how it kind of separated us from like other people that were playing video games, because everyone loved video games like that we
You
knew.
could just pick it up and play, but we were more into like
Yeah.
the industry. We were into like what was going behind the scenes, what was like the news, what was coming out next.
Yeah, what
and-
I was just about to say, like what's coming out next, because we always knew what was about to come out. And when you would
Yeah.
talk to other people, they had no idea.
Yeah, no.
Like I knew someone that bought a PlayStation.
Yeah.
Christian. He bought a PlayStation, and we were playing it in his garage. He had it set up on a little TV. And then I started talking about Nintendo's next system, and he had no idea what I was talking about. Like, no clue. And he was good at video games. He bought video games. He played video games.
Yeah.
He had no clue Nintendo was putting out, like, a next-gen system at the time. And this is, like, probably less than a year before it was coming out. And he didn't even know about it. I'm like, you don't know about, like, the Nintendo 64 that's coming out? He's like, no, what is that? So we knew about stuff that was coming out. We knew about like Super Nintendo was coming out. Nobody at school knew that Super Nintendo was coming out, but we knew. You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that. That's the thing. Um, you
We know
know,
about systems. Even like we also didn't just know about systems. We also knew about systems that were in like beta systems that they were like before they were even being created. Some of them that weren't even like released, and some of them that became other things. Like when Sega was introducing, the next version of their system,
mhm,
we went through all the stages that they went through before they got to their final edition,
mhm, mhm.
and those things were just like it was so interesting, and to know what was going on the interest in the industry, that and I can't believe we got access to all that information at the time.
And I miss those days.
Yeah.
I miss the phone calls.
Yeah.
I miss the magazines. I miss like there was a little bit of like mystery to video games that doesn't exist anymore. There was a
Yeah.
little bit of like, I don't know. It was like so much there was so much more curiosity about like what the future of video games was, because the technology was increasing a lot faster back then, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The jumps
Yeah.
were much bigger. I mean,
It was because it was a green product. I mean, video games was just kind of starting. It was
yeah,
at the beginning of its era.
it was.
So things evolve, kind of like phones today.
Hmm.
I mean, now they're just at the point where everything seems the same. The jumps aren't huge, so it's
Right.
kind of like at the beginning was the evolving. Wow, bigger screen, better cameras. You would see the evolution of them. Now they almost seem like you're buying a new one. It's like, oh, it feels like the old one. Like,
Yeah.
so that's how it feels with video games. But a big thing about video games today, and I'm just going to say it out today, which is that everything is about graphics. And back then, because graphics were limited,
Hmm.
people had to think of ideas and
Yeah.
think what made video games fun. And that is something that's, I think, lost in today.
Hmm.
And they had to think originality of a game. They had to think about the gameplay, how well that connected and it played. People used to say, oh, I feel like I'm connected to the like a Street Fighter guy. I felt like it's me fighting. The gameplay was there. Well, there was a lot of fighting games that was one that people connected to.
Yeah.
Um, so it was gameplay, it was the originality of what kind of games there were. There was also the different styles of drawing,
Yeah.
because I mean, like Samurai Showdown versus like say Street Fighter, like even though they were in the same level of graphics, they were very distinct.
And
Now
like
you put
Mortal
them,
Kombat was digitized,
yeah,
so that
you
had
put
a
them
whole
in
different
first
look,
person.
altogether.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Games like
totally.
Pit Fighter, digitized. They look like
Donkey Kong Country
yeah,
or Killer Instinct, just the games are totally different.
Clay Fighter with
Yeah. Oh
claymation.
my God. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so much creativity, so much originality. And today, because video games became so big, I think the industry kind of destroyed it, because now it's created and made by people that are not video game enthusiasts, but more people who are trying to profit and make it into a profitable industry,
Yeah.
and not thinking so much about the gamer.
Mhm.
That's why they come up with these things where like they charge you for like a every little thing in the video
DLC
game.
and
Yeah,
yeah.
not even DLCs. I mean, DLCs are okay, but I mean, it's like an extension to a game. But what really annoys me is when they're charging you for all the little like
Microtransactions.
the gotcha.
Yeah,
System.
microtransactions.
Yeah, microtransactions of all these little like um, customizations that you can do, to your character, to your vehicle, to your guns, to everything. And now a game that would have costed you like now they're giving them for free, but it'll end up costing you $1,000 if you want, all the little things that you to make your character look original from your friend.
Well, you know, the good old days were amazing, and
Yes.
I think there's good stuff coming our way, in video games. But we'll wrap it up for now.